everyone, and welcome to the Big Music Project's big masterclass in graphics design with Joe Lovelock. Joe has worked with a host of massive brands, including Global, which is where you are now, and he also designed the Big Music Project's lovely new website. So I'm just going to get straight into it and introduce Joe to you, who will be able to take over and get you involved in this fantastic masterclass. So welcome, Joe. Yay.
So when I was 17, my sister gave me a book. Inside were all these incredible images that I'd never discovered before. All these photographers that I'd never heard of, and all these images that, quite frankly, blew my mind. There's a photographer called Diane Arbus, who was like a New York street photographer, and all these kind of crazy images, really intense, of people that she met just wandering around. Henri Cartier-Bresson travelled all over the world and documented all sorts of crazy situations. David Bailey, who was one of the key figures for fashion photography during the 60s, and a lot of his images became iconic and really defined that period. A guy called Sebastian Salgado, who he's recently done a sort of nature series, but he's been going for a long time, and again, really sort of powerful, striking images with this sort of high contrast, really intense. Another guy called William Eggleston, who was really the first person to establish colour photography as a credible art form. He's actually got an exhibition at the Portrait Gallery at the moment, you should check out. Then also, thanks to a mate of mine, I discovered another photographer called Anton Cabin. He was a music photographer for a lot of bands that I was into during the sort of 90s, late 80s. U2, Depeche Mode, REM, sort of defined a lot of their look. Again, just incredible images that I'd never really come across before, and I just was inspired by. Now, the reason I talk about this is because, for me, these were the images that made me want to be creative. I saw them, and it gave me that energy to want to go out and do my own stuff and emulate these things that I'd seen. And it also gave me all these ideas of things that I thought looked cool, basically. Things to try out that I could attempt to replicate myself. "15 years later. So about 4 years ago, after working as a designer for quite a while, I set up my own design agency called Studio Lovelock. We do a lot of branding and websites and logos and that kind of thing. So just a quick whiz through some of the stuff we do. A few bits of animation that we do as well. And we do some stock frame stuff as well, which is quite fun.
The UNEX survey monitors the postal service in around 40 countries worldwide. It's a big job. We want to understand where the chain runs smoothly and where the link is broken. Thanks to your participation, we can improve this service for people all over the world. To keep life simple, we have created a website called Panel Zone. Here you can register the address with...
So what happened in between? In short, I'll give you a summary. From those photos, it made me want to go out and pick up a camera. So I took a load of photos, ended up doing a degree in graphic design. When I finished my degree, I basically took any opportunity that I could get my hands on. So anybody who said, oh, you know, my cousin needs a website, or my friend needs a flyer, whatever it was, I did it. And slowly but surely I built a portfolio. And then once I had that, I was in a position to start applying for jobs. And eventually, I managed to get my first job here. So, of these three things, what do you think is the most important? Just a quick show of hands. So number one, design degree. Knowing the right people? Yeah. Or number three, great portfolio. Yeah, that's right. So I'm not knocking university. It's good fun and you can certainly get a lot out of it. And it's a great sort of framework for just producing work and meeting people and so on. But ultimately, that's not what how you'll get a creative job. The key thing is the portfolio. In terms of that initial step, so I get sent lots of stuff fairly regularly, and I can tell you, without fail, the first thing I look at is the portfolio. To be honest, I quite rarely read the resume or the cover letter or any of that. If the portfolio is good, then maybe I'll look at the other stuff, but really, the only thing I'm interested in is the work. And from looking at someone's portfolio, I can quite quickly get a sense of how technically creative they are, the type of stuff they've worked on, and how solid their understanding is of graphic design. So if you're interested in a career, the first thing you need to do, the main thing you need to focus on, is building a portfolio. So what do you need to do to build a portfolio? Number one, you need to find a spark. You need to find that thing that gets you excited. So for me, it was photography. And I didn't end up being a photographer, although I did want to do that for a while. But it can come from anywhere. And the reason this is so important, and maybe this is, if you only take one thing away from this talk, remember this point. Because the reality is, the creative industry is not the easiest thing to get into. You're going to need to put in a lot of hours, and you're going to have to put in a lot of hard work. You're probably not going to get paid that much, especially to start with. It's quite competitive. And if you don't have that enthusiasm for what you do, if you don't really want to go out and be creative and care, you're probably not going to make it. Because when it comes down to it, you won't put in the effort that's required. And if you do make it, you probably won't enjoy it that much anyway, because if you don't really like doing what you're doing, then there's little point. However, if you do find that spark and you do love it, it's an incredibly fulfilling way to earn a living. You know, I'm not going to lie to you, there's stuff that I have to do which is not as exciting, but I still get to do a lot of creative stuff. And it's day to day, it's quite fun, and I genuinely look forward to coming to work every day, which is, you know, a very lucky position to be in. So initially, your spark can come from anywhere. You don't need to worry too much about what it is, it's just got to inspire you one way or another. It might be old comics, maybe you're into comics. Maybe you love old school packaging, all this elegant typography and kind of beautiful illustration. Maybe it's children's illustration or books or book covers. Maybe it's album covers. I was quite into album covers when I was younger. The point is, you need to find what works for you. And, you know, it's good to kind of venture off the beaten track. Don't feel like... Look for that stuff that's different. And don't worry if it's kind of random or obscure or other people think it's weird. If it works for you and it gets you excited, then you can't ask for any more than that. So when you find it, treasure it, because you need that. And you've got to keep it going to kind of give you that energy and that motivation to keep pushing through. Because, like I say, if you don't have it, when it comes down to it, you're going to go out rather than staying and finishing that bit of work. Or you're going to watch telly instead of doing that other illustration you need to do. A couple of quick side points. When you're looking at stuff, try and resist the temptation to just kind of, especially if you're on Pinterest or Instagram, just kind of streaming through hundreds of images. You're going to get so much more if you kind of take your time with a single image and deconstruct it and try and figure out what it is about that image that really excites you. You know, the texture, the color, the typography, the composition. You know, As a designer, you need to learn how to create certain aesthetics, and an aesthetic comes from the subtlety of how different components fit together. So you need to take the time with stuff and don't just whiz through loads of shit, because it just kind of goes over your head and it doesn't resonate. Number 2, do stuff. It's really basic. It really is that simple. You just got to do stuff. You know, you've got to tap into that energy from that spark I'm talking about and use it to motivate you to just do anything. You know, if you're into typography, do your own typefaces. If you're into illustration, you know, copy that stuff. And it's, just to be clear, it's perfectly fine to imitate the people that you like. You know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, just trying to copy them to start with. That's how everybody starts, you know, and that's how you learn how things are constructed. And then over time, you kind of develop your own style and your own tastes. But almost everyone begins by imitating. And also kind of, you know, that, especially if you're having to do it on the side of another job, or like when you're tired, you know, you need that little buzz of finishing stuff. So try and set yourself, don't give yourself like a crazy ambitious goal that is going to take you 2 years to do. Try and give yourself little chunks of stuff that you can work through and you get that satisfaction of finishing. Because the other thing is that when you finish stuff, you kind of, you can see where you've got to, and then you're on to the next thing, you're trying to improve. And like I say, grab every opportunity. So anything that comes your way, do it. You work in a pub and they need a flyer, do it. Your aunt's got a new balloon business and she needs a logo. See if you can do it. And tell people that this is what you do. You know, make this your thing, because then people will come and, oh, can you help me out with this? Can you help me out with that? And you become the, oh, he's the graphics guy. And if you can't find anything, set yourself your own briefs, okay? A lot of what you're going to need is the kind of motivation and drive, and that's got to come from within, because, like I say, it is quite hard work. And the other thing is it's meant to be fun. You know, the reason you want to get into this career is because it's satisfying, it's fulfilling, and you enjoy it. So at the same time, it's okay to just kind of play around with stupid stuff for your own entertainment. So I'm pretty busy at work, but I still try and make the time to do my own stuff, and it's just kind of to entertain me, really. And this is still live photography is just some snaps. I took one on holiday. Cactuses, pretty exciting. Some shadows. This is another bit of animation that I've been working on. Just a little side project. And then this is another thing. I was playing around with these shapes and sort of discovered this sort of numeral system, and then animated it, and then persuaded someone who shares an office with me to build this as a clock. So it's a little Chrome plugin that you can get, and when you open up a new tab, you get the clock. It's deceptively complicated to build, by the way. Not that I had to do that bit. Okay, so number 3. So just to recap, you need that spark, you need that energy, and you need to be doing stuff. You need to get better. Again, it's really obvious, but it's something you've got to kind of consciously make happen. You know, initially, just by virtue of doing stuff, you're learning things all the time. But slowly, you've got to be a little bit more focused with what you're doing and a little bit more refined. try to figure out what you enjoy the most. What are you best at? And maybe also consider what job opportunities there are and how you can start to tailor the things that you're interested in to the jobs that are out there. So, for the sake of argument, let's say it's graphic design that you're into. So what does getting better at graphic design mean? So yeah, the most important question all graphic designers should be asking, why? Like a 4-year-old, just keep asking why? Why do you need a poster? Why do you need a website? Why do you need an animation? And the reason is that as a designer, your job is to solve problems. Okay, you're not there to do stuff that looks pretty, or to kind of satisfy your own things. When you're a commercial designer, you're there to work for the client. And the reason why it's so important is because to solve the problem, you need to understand it. Okay? And once you have an understanding of why you're doing something and what it is you need to achieve with that, you then have a framework to start assessing whether or not your work is any good. So rather than it just existing in a vacuum, you can sort of measure it against a sort of tangible objective. I'll give you a quick example. So a client calls a designer and he says, I need you to design me a sign. Sure, what do you want on it? So I need the sign to say, beware of the dog, and I want a picture of a dog on it. So I say, okay, cool, I can do that. He comes back and he gives him this. And the client says, that's rubbish. That's not what I need at all. I'm not paying for this. And he hangs up. He calls a different designer. I need you to design me a sign. And the designer says, sure. Why do you need a sign? And the client says, I want to warn people about my dog. And the designer says, why? And the client says, well, there's been all these break-ins recently and I want to scare off any burglars. So I want to make sure that they know there's a dog and that they shouldn't come in. Ah, okay. Comes back with this. The guy says, that's brilliant. Now, this is obviously quite an overly simplistic example, but on the surface, the designs are exactly the same. They both say beware of the dog and they both got a picture of a dog on it. Which dog are you going to be more careful around? Probably this one. So, like I say, one of the things you need to be factoring in as you're kind of improving is thinking about why you're doing stuff. What are you trying to achieve in it? So just to take that example and apply it to a slightly more complex project, this is a brief we got in. So the client says, we need to rebrand and we need a new website. We go through kind of a slightly elaborate, long-winded process. But essentially, it's all about understanding the why. So it's kind of taking time to get them to figure out why they're doing something and try and be clear about that. And it's deceptively difficult to get people to tell you, believe me. But anyway, the upshot is that they needed to update their identity because it was sort of, I'll show you in a sec, it's kind of dated and not that great. And they needed to distinguish themselves from their competitors. So they needed to appear to be offering something different and have an identity that was recognizable. And ultimately, they need to attract new clients. They need to win new business. So this was the one that they have at the moment. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. And this is what we've come back with. So for them, their people were really important to them. They wanted to put their sort of personality at the front. They're also, they're a PR company, so they're about copy. So it's got to be really tight. They need to just practice what they're preaching and demonstrate that you can get across messages really clearly. So we stripped away loads and loads of copy and just kind of made everything really succinct and to the point. We've got these sort of friendly illustrations that are meant to be sort of playful and light-hearted, but not too childish. Quite a bright colour palette, so it feels quite lively. And then also finding ways to highlight the calibre of their clientele, so just sort of prominent use of the logos of the people they work for, and the key stats around what they've managed to achieve for their various clients. So coming back to you guys, when you're putting your portfolio together, what does it need to demonstrate? So when I look at a portfolio, there's two key things that I'm looking for. The first thing is an ability to understand the brief. So all the stuff I've just been talking about, you know, the projects where I can see that they've understood what they're trying to achieve, and I can see that they've responded directly to it. The second is having the technical ability to execute that. You know, that's where the kind of creativity comes in. So, you know, coming back to the dog example, that was kind of something quite quick and a bit crap, but there's, you know, if the goal is to stop burglars breaking in, then maybe a sign isn't the best way to do it. But kind of thinking outside the box and finding new ideas to kind of bring this to life.
Sorry, can I ask a question about the dog design? Was it a drawing that you did like on a board, or did you take a picture and turn it into like a design?
To be honest, I searched into Google just for a picture of crazy dog.
So like if you had the idea to get that dog, what like technical ability to get it on the screen, how would you do it? Would you draw it like on those boards?
Yeah,
Photoshop or how?
Yeah, so with something like that, you might draw it and scan it in, or you can find a photo of a dog and kind of treat it. So just to summarise, these are the three key points, and it's cyclical. You know, find that spark and hold on to it. Do stuff that you feel inspired to do. Consciously get better, and then round and round and round. You've got to keep going, because otherwise you lose momentum and you lose energy, and you probably won't make it. But like I say, if you do, it's a fantastic job. One final point I just want to make, and it sounds a bit flippant, but don't be a dick. The reason I say this is because the relationships that you build with people over the course of your career are just as important as your ability. And if people like you and you're easy to work with, they're far more likely to give you a hand or give you a job or to get you to do a bit of work. You might be the best designer in the world, but if you're a pain in the arse to be with, no one's going to help you out. And really, that's it. Apologies. So it's kind of like, I know I've been quite top level, but I didn't want to get kind of too bogged down into in kind of technical specifics. But and I appreciate probably some of you are here because you already found that spark. But if you have any questions, give us a shout.
Oh, hi. My name's Natalie. I'm 18 today.
Hey Natalie, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thanks, mate. And one question I had, I think a lot of people here are musicians.
Okay.
And well, like the part I have a problem with graphic design myself is like setting an agreement between free work and paid work.
Yeah.
And do you ever like how do you set out your copyright and not copyright, like agreement to like the business?
Was agreed. Yeah. Okay. It's a minefield, and it's an ongoing problem. I think for us in terms of how we cost stuff up and what we agree to do, the truth is it sort of varies from client to client. Mm-hmm. I think as a designer there's various factors at play. So there's obviously you need to get paid, and there's how much you need. So for a business we need to earn a certain amount to kind of keep ticking over. But then there's also projects where you're going to really love doing it. So that's kind of satisfying. So in a sense, that's worth some money. Invariably, the ones that are most exciting have the smaller budgets, I'm afraid. And the other factor is building relationships with people. So as a business, you're always trying to find new avenues of work. So if you get in with somebody and they like you and they want to work with you and and you've done a good job, there's a pretty good chance they'll recommend you to other people. So in terms of what you agree to do and what you want to charge, broadly speaking, those are the three factors we consider. In terms of the specifics of what you agree to offer for a fixed cost, it's really difficult because customers generally are used to buying things for a fixed price. So almost always the first thing people want to know is, how much does this cost? The reality is that certainly for us and probably for yourselves as well, how much something costs is related to how long it takes. And how long it takes is largely dependent on the client and how they want to run things. So I haven't really answered your question. The short answer is you've got to try and be as clear as you can up front. And when you sense that you're having to do more than you were expecting, you've got to kind of flag it and negotiate. But there's no sort of golden rule, really. And it depends on the client. You know, with some people, they're quite reasonable and you can have that conversation and it's all sorted. Other people are kind of a little bit harder to deal with, and it's just kind of preempting those problems before they come. I mean, the other factor I would say is certainly at the beginning is that, you know, building your portfolio is still potentially a priority. So I appreciate you need to earn a living, and I don't want to be dismissive of that, but the unfortunate reality is often you have to work for less than ideally you would. Sorry.
So, have you ever had like a difficult client? And if so, how did you deal with that client to make sure that you didn't damage your brand or, you know, walk away from it unscathed kind of thing? So how did you deal with that after you've paid maybe?
Yeah, I think you've got to decide how important that relationship is. And if it's something you're invested in, then sometimes you have to back down. I think ideally, I mean, so for us, the issue is always around when we've agreed to do something for a fixed cost. So for example, someone comes to us and they want a logo, and we agree a price for what that logo will cost. But then, you know, you're 2/3 of the way through, and in your mind, or maybe you think you've finished, but they're not happy with it. And therefore they want you to do more, but you've already sort of used up that time. So there's that point where it becomes kind of subjective as to whether you've finished or not. You try and negotiate and be reasonable and find a compromise, basically, and try and kind of think ahead. If it's a client that you're less fussed about and you kind of are prepared to lose them, then maybe you can put up more of a fight and draw a line. But I mean, it also depends with the type of person you are and how good you are at that stuff. I mean, personally, I find it quite difficult, if I'm honest. Because, you know, you also want to be a nice person. You don't want to be a dick. But yeah, it's difficult. I think that I guess in summary, you've got to try and make it's being clear with people up front as to what the deal is, and flagging it as soon as possible if you sense that it's getting out of control.
Just like outlining every single thing, so there's no mishaps along the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the frustrating thing is it's quite time consuming to do all that documentation up front. But yeah, and it also depends how you account for your time and that kind of stuff.
Hi, I'm Roxanne.
Hey.
Basically, for the past 5 years, I've always used Word.
Okay.
To do logos.
Yeah.
And then I'll nick a little picture from Google. But I put it in the PDF. But when I put it on my social media platforms, I still get that fuzzy effect. So what would be the best basic software to use for designing logos?
Okay, I wouldn't use Word. So the main software that we use is Adobe. So it's Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects for animation. There's a couple of others, but those are the main three, certainly for us. They are quite expensive, but I think, so we pay about 50 quid a month, but I think if you're a student, you can get it for £10 a month, maybe, and you get everything, which is actually a pretty good deal, and they've got a type kit as well, which gives you loads of fonts and stuff. And one thing I would say, I mean, if you're serious, if you want to pursue this as a career, sooner or later you've got to know how to use that software, because it's just a prerequisite.
No, mine's just like a shortcut rather than I'll just do it myself. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I guess if
Branding.
the other one then is maybe there's one called Sketch, which I think is a bit cheaper. I think it used to be free, but maybe now it's subscription. I'm not sure. But you can do quite a lot of stuff in that. Yeah.
Wicked, thanks. What can you do in InDesign that you can't do on Photoshop? And what would you be complementary to Photoshop?
So InDesign is more for print documents,
Like magazines?
magazines. So yeah, magazine layout or PDFs. Like if we're doing presentations, we'll usually mock it up in InDesign. But it's
So what you create on Photoshop?
yeah, Photoshop is so like web stuff generally doing in Photoshop because it's sort of pixel based as well. And it's better for sort of manipulating images and that kind of stuff. In terms of creating assets from scratch, Illustrator's really good. It's all vector stuff. I don't know if that means anything to you, but yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
How do you merge sound and imagery? Because those two things are important. Whenever we're watching something, the sound and the imagery tends to
Fit. Yeah,
so
yeah.
how do you choose the right music to the right image, or the right image to the right music or sound?
So it depends on the project. So sometimes you might have a specific soundtrack that you have to animate to, or you have to work with. So in that circumstance, so like if you're doing a music video, for example, then the track is predefined, and you've got to work to that. If you're doing it the other way around, that animation I did with my kids dancing, I sort of been playing around with stuff, and I just tried out different tracks, and sooner or later you find one that fits, and then you kind of work to that. So it's a little bit trial and error, and then at a certain point you kind of start to tighten things up. So you're starting to edit specifically to the beats and the kind of try and match things to the bars and stuff. But yeah, it depends on the project and which way around you need to work.
How did you learn to get it right for the colors and fonts?
It takes time. You kind of
There's trends as well, like how they...
yeah. So you're definitely influenced by trends. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. I mean, so generally, like in the kind of broad process we go through with each project is, once we've kind of figured out all that why stuff, we start to think about how we can translate that visually. What kind of visual language can we use to get that? And part of that is colours. So we'll generally build a mood board. Often I kind of use Pinterest for that kind of stuff, which is really good. So, for example, like, with that example I showed it, one of the key things was friendly and personable. So we kind of did a mood board around certain ideas that we felt conveyed that friendliness. And then colour is obviously quite important in there. So you try and be led based on what you're trying to achieve. So if it's something friendly, you kind of, you go for more primary colours. Whereas if it was, I don't know, a nightclub, you kind of darker, more somber, or kind of more subtle tones. It's that kind of thing. Then in terms of getting that palette to balance, it's just tweaking a little bit, and you see other stuff you like. You see a nice photo that has the right kind of feel to it. You can just blur it, and you can colour pick, and just tweak it, and that's quite a nice way to do things. But just look around and see what you like.
Is there like a software or a tool to create your own font? So like if you've got something in mind but you can't find anything similar, how would you do that? It's quite complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, there is stuff. I haven't done it myself, and I think there is something for free, but I don't know the name of it, I'm afraid. But yeah, there's definitely, you allocate an image for each letter, or each character rather, and then it translates that into a font. Yeah. Go on.
How do you go around copyright in a sense that what's the line between inspiration and plagiarism?
I think personal integrity to a certain point. It's a tricky one. I think, like everyone's, I'm not, you're always influenced by other people. I think deep down when you're doing it to what extent you've ripped someone else off. And I think that should be your first port of call. I've never actually in all my career had any issues, and never been aware of any cases where there's been a copyright infringement that's come up. But yeah, I think you just got to not be a dick.
You know how you done when you're showing us your portfolio, you had a lot of web design stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you studied HTML coding as well?
Well, I did at the very, very beginning before I got a job. I kind of taught myself to build websites, but I didn't really like it that much, and it didn't come naturally to me. So now I don't do any of that stuff. I work with freelancers who build stuff for me. I've got enough understanding to figure out how best to do stuff and what's possible and what isn't, but I don't do any of that stuff myself. Yeah, so Dreamweaver is kind of an HTML-based, HTML and CSS. I mean, it depends. Have you got a specific project in mind?
Well, I want to be able to make similar websites like yours.
Okay.
And just simple content. If it was just say for instance a musician,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted a website I'm able to code that myself instead of using somebody else's, like a Tumblr or something like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have to make a Tumblr theme. It's just that I want to be able to make it my own.
Cool. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it depends to what extent you really want to understand coding. Like, if that's your thing and you want to get your head around that, then you've got to invest the time in learning that stuff. If it's more about the design side of things, then there's software out there that allows you to create stuff without needing to get too stuck into the code. So there's another Adobe one, I can't remember what it's called. Wait a minute, I can probably show you. I can't remember. Edge, maybe? But anyway, there's one that's kind of far more drag and drop. So you kind of design it you design it and it does the code in the background for you. Edge maybe, I can't remember what it's called.
Does that allow you to upload videos though?
Yeah, you can embed videos and stuff. So it depends. With video, it's easiest to kind of pull it from somewhere else, like Vimeo or YouTube, and then you just paste the URL in, and it sort of pulls it in automatically.
What was it called at the beginning? I'll just Google it. It'll come up.
I can't remember. Oh, maybe I can get it from here. Hang on a minute. I think it's called Muse, M-U-S-E, but I might be wrong on that. But yeah, it's pretty user friendly, and you can sort of figure your way out around it.
Did you do that on there?
That image?
Yeah.
No, I stole that from someone because I thought it was cool. From NASA, I think. That would be that copyright infringement that we were talking about. But I don't show that to anyone apart from you guys. So. Cool. Anyone else? Or you're good?
How has technology affected your industry in relation to what you try to achieve when you're dealing with a brand?
Okay.
Especially to do with the target goal of possibly the marketing side of things. Do you deal with the marketing side of things? Because when you're dealing with the branding side of things, you work closely with the marketing department, and since you're dealing with branding, and it's like, what's the relationship you have and how much influence do you have in those side of things, and what's the targets you're trying to achieve when you're branding a product?
Okay.
In relation to like
like 10 questions. Okay, I'll pick out a couple of ones. So, in terms of our relationship with the clients and what we specifically do, it depends on the client. So, if you're working with a small business, quite often.
Specifically, have you dealt with an industry like a music company too?
No. Well, kind of global. You're kind of like a music company, aren't you? Yeah, media entertainment. So in bigger companies, yeah, you'll have different departments, and it's politics. So it depends who your contact is, how important they are, whether they want to get other people involved, whether those other people want to get involved, etc., etc. You know, ideally, you'll always get a better result if you've got everyone sort of singing the same tune and working to the kind of same end goals. In practice, that doesn't always happen just because people are busy and different priorities and stuff. But ideally, you kind of try, everyone who's involved, you want to kind of get them in and get them to all agree what they're trying to achieve. And in practice, it's not always possible. Do you want me to answer one of the other questions? Or? No? Yeah. There you go. Cool. You're welcome.